welcome to another Oscars week video. If you have missed any of my previous videos, or if you are watching these out of order, I will leave a playlist of all my Oscars week videos linked up here. I really enjoyed making these videos last year. I like giving my thoughts on and opinions on everything that's been nominated, and it's interesting to look at kind of, you know, my watching history and stuff like that. Now, the short features are something that I obviously don't watch kind of normally, but as soon as the nominations come out, I have a couple of independent theatres in my area that show the live action, the animated and the documentary shorts. One theatre shows the live action, the animated, and another theatre shows the documentary shorts, so I saw them on 2 different days, but I did see the animation and the live action back to back, just like I did last year, and then the next day I went and saw the documentary shorts, and it's always eye-opening because you would never normally get to see these kind of films on the big screen were it not for these indie theatres doing this, so it's always a lot of fun. So I will talk about each of these films and then let you know my pick for the win. I did correctly pick, I think I might have picked all 3 last year. I think my predictions for all 3 were correct, so that's not too bad. Most of my other predictions for all the other Oscars categories were not correct, so there you go. So in the order that I watched them then, we had, where are they, animated short films. Daughter, which was from the Czech Republic. I found this film not only dark and scary, but just a little bit creepy as well. I wasn't a fan of it. It didn't really have any dialogue. The style was kind of like paper mache, where only the eyes in the face moved, and I just, yeah, it was just a little bit creepy. I wasn't a massive fan of it. Then we had Hair Love, which is the kind of Sony Studios one, which was the one that I had already seen because it played before a film that I saw in the regular cinema, and I absolutely loved this one. This one has a little girl and her dad and using YouTube to kind of do a hairstyle, and we know that mom's there, but you don't find out why until the end, and it was just a lovely film. It was funny, it had heart, and it had like real issues, and I think that this is definitely my favourite out of the bunch. Then we had Kit Bull, which is a kitten making friend with a pit bull when they're both kind of on the street and struggling a little bit, and it was all right. It just wasn't anything groundbreaking, and to be honest, I couldn't understand why it had been nominated. I think the only reason it's been nominated is it's got Pixar attached to it, so it's not a Pixar film, but Pixar is supportive of it in some way, and it was cute but didn't really blow me away. Then we had Memorable, which was definitely very beautiful to look at. It was done as almost like oil painting, the style of it, but like last year, this is about somebody who has Alzheimer's. It's like in these short animated films, we have to have a film about Alzheimer's in there. This is the rule. And so in some ways it was beautiful to watch, but the subject matter was obviously, whilst very real, was just quite depressing. It was interesting the way that they tackled the film and decided to address the issue, but for me it was just too dark of a subject matter. I didn't find it particularly enjoyable, but I did find it pleasing to watch. Then we had the final one, which was Sister, which I am slightly torn because I really enjoyed this one as well, and if I'm doing kind of choice versus prediction, this one could win. This one is in black and white, and the animation style is kind of like woolen or felt kind of puppets, like a sort of stop animation style, and talks about the one-child rule in China that obviously ran until 2015, and all of the sisters who weren't born and all of the siblings who weren't born. And I really liked the way it was done as a kind of like what if type of film, and there are some like fun features in it, like because they're made of wool, he kind of starts to unravel his imaginary sister, and it definitely was memorable. I think as an animation, I probably preferred Hair Love, but as a story, I thought that this was good, but it was almost verging onto the documentary, even though it was animated. So that was an interesting one, but both of those were really strong. And then a couple of the highly commended ones. I remember last year being blown away by one of the highly commended ones. There was a very funny one about mountain rescue helicopter. And it was just funny, and I can see why it got highly commended and why it didn't necessarily got nominated, but it was very funny and very entertaining. So yeah, it was interesting to watch the animated shorts, and those two would be my pick, but probably Hair Love would be my ultimate pick if you know, made me choose one, which is what this video is all about basically, isn't it? Then we had the live action short films, and a little bit like last year, they were all very dark subject matter and just kind of reminding us about the horrible state of the world sometimes. I felt like there wasn't like a redeeming, like, oh, this is cheerful in the bunch, really. So we had Brotherhood, which was set in Tunisia with 3 brothers. One brother just returns home, and it turns out he's been fighting in Syria and has brought his new Syrian wife home with him, and we see the mother and father, the way they react differently to this new wife and this new member of their family, and then things go a little bit deeper, and it's just very depressing and very dark, and I did not enjoy it even a little bit. Then we have the NEFTA Football Club, which was really funny. It begins with 2 guys who have, as it turns out, lost this donkey or mule in the desert somewhere. I think it was on the Algerian border. I want to say the Algerian border. And obviously we know what might be in that particular mule, and it's actually 2 young boys that find this mule. And I'm not going to give away the kind of ending, but it was very, very funny and very kind of, you know, even if you plan to do something bad, it doesn't always work out bad. Things can still, there's a bit of a silver lining with things. But again, the fact that we have children finding cocaine and, you know, trying to make a profit off this cocaine, it's not a nice subject matter, really. Not a very nice subject matter. Then we have The Neighbour's Window, which was probably kind of the least dark of all of them. Still deals with some dark subject matter, but basically there's these 2 New York apartment buildings, and we have a family living in one, seeing a new couple who's moved into the apartment across from them in the other building, and this new couple have sex and have parties and dance with each other all the time. And this family is a new mother and her husband, and they have 2 toddlers as well, and she's obviously very much like, oh, you're watching them have sex and you're jealous, and he's like, well, you're watching them have sex and you're jealous, and kind of the discussion around them. And then we see that actually everything across the way is not all happy and jolly, and the 2 women eventually meet, and we find out that actually the younger woman has been watching the family and been very envious of the family and envious of what they have. And so it's that whole, the grass isn't always greener, and also a bit of a social commentary on social media and what we put out there. And, you know, you don't know what's going on behind my camera here, and you don't know what's going on around the outside of my Instagram photos. And I really enjoyed that one. I thought it was very good. I don't necessarily think that it's going to win, but it was very strong, and it was definitely like the least dark of the bunch, even though it did have some dark elements to it. Then we have Saria, which was almost again verging into documentary territory. I think if they'd gone a different direction with this one, it would have been in the short documentary subject. But this one is based on a true story of an orphanage in Guatemala where it's basically not actually an orphanage, but people involved in the sex trade. They have these teenage girls, and you can imagine what they accept money to do with these teenage girls. And we see these teenage girls who are pregnant and mistreated and smoking and just called bitches all of the time, and their kind of uprising and attempt to escape this orphanage. And like I say, it's based on a true story, and it's very dark, but this one would probably be my pick for the win. I didn't know about this, and it was a really interesting story, and the fact that it was kind of told from the girls' point of view, so we have their perspective on things and their determination in the face of adversity. So I really enjoyed that one. And then we have A Sister, which is about a woman. We see her in a car, and she says to the guy that's driving the car, I need to call my sister, she's got my little girl and she's not very well, I need to call her and she needs to take care of her, etc, etc. And obviously we find out that she's using this as a cover-up to call emergency services. Obviously something bad is happening, and we see that all play out. It was very, very intense. We were all definitely kind of holding our breath watching it, but again, very good. And again, a definite social commentary on women and the lengths that sometimes women have to go to in order to feel safe, that men wouldn't have to go through, and the lengths and the extremes and the positions that we are put in on a daily basis. And was very dark, and like I say, it was very well structured because it was very, very intense experience, and I feel like we kind of all went through the experience of calling and the, however it's resolved. I'm not giving any spoilers, obviously. But yeah, it was an interesting one. But I think my pick in this category would definitely be Syria, the one about the Guatemalan orphanage. And I think it's good that they, chose to dramatize it rather than put it in as a documentary, because I think it would have seemed a lot darker as a documentary, because it did not have a happy ending. Then we have the documentary short subjects. We have In the Absence, which is about a ferry which sunk off of Korea, which I had no idea that this had happened, but led to the impeachment and stepping down of the president. And it was just handled so awfully, and the captain left without giving any indication to anyone as to how they should handle this state of emergency. And so the ship basically sank with a load of people still trapped inside because they were never told to evacuate. It was all right. It wasn't anything groundbreaking. It was interesting for me because I didn't know about the story, but I think if you've watched news articles on it or were kind of aware of it at the time, which apparently I just was not, then you kind of know the facts. It talks about the civilian divers that went to try and help with the rescue effort and the mental impact it had on them, which was interesting, but it wasn't anything groundbreaking. Then we have Learning to Skateboard in a War Zone If You're a Girl, which follows this school that was set up in Kabul in Afghanistan that's educating women and also teaching them how to skateboard, and I loved every moment of it. So many of the girls I sort of could recognise as girls like I used to teach, and that was really kind of heartwarming for me, and watching them trying to be, again, determined in the face of adversity, and being educated and having these experiences while all these suicide bombs are going off around them, and while their city is still under attack and it's not safe for them to walk the streets, and learning that their sister is a year older but she's not allowed to go because when she hits 13 she's not allowed to leave the house, but she's allowed to go at the minute. And just the kind of the night and day experience of their experience versus women and girls who haven't been allowed to go to this school, or haven't been allowed out of the house, or haven't been allowed an education. And one of the mothers of the girls who were educating people in the state school, the mother has these like 9 children or something, and she says, we're illiterate, we can't read and write, I got married when I was 14 and started having children, and this is my life now. And she's 35, and I'm 35, and it was like this, I would not have put her at the same age as me, and you know, I felt very privileged at that point and was very aware of my privilege at that point. And so yeah, that film, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed what they were doing. I feel like you know, the girls all have these skate shoes that they put on for their skating lessons. I feel like that bit should be sponsored by Vans for sure. But yeah, I really enjoyed the feature, and it's that one, I think, was that one the Netflix feature? So it could be on Netflix. Then we have oh no, this one was the Netflix feature. It was Life Overtakes Me, which is about children who have gone into a kind of regression, like gone to sleep and ended up basically in a coma because of trauma that has happened to them. And so there's all these refugees seeking asylum in Sweden, and whose parents or who they themselves have gone through some kind of trauma as in their countries before they've come to Sweden, and so they're basically, yeah, in this kind of elective coma state, and talking to medical professionals and talking to those families. And this one for me, I really didn't enjoy because it felt really like exploitative. I felt like the children were being filmed without their permission, and we, you know, saw them in bed, and we saw them getting bathed, and we saw them getting examined by a doctor, and it felt very, very kind of icky to me because the children didn't know they were being filmed, and they, you know, hadn't given their permission to have these parts of their bodies shown on film. And so for that reason, I really didn't like this film. I had no idea about this condition. I knew that, you know, children of trauma sometimes chose not to speak, and I've worked with children who have elected to be mute, and but I didn't know that it could go this far. But like I say, I had a lot of issues with the film and kind of issues with its nomination because of that. I don't like the fact that these children were being filmed without their knowledge of being filmed, and I don't really like the way the film was edited either. We had a lot of shots of like trees and leaves, and I didn't think that they necessarily needed to be included. They just gave the film extra length. And then we have Walk, Run, Cha Cha, which is about Vietnamese immigrants who are kind of cha-cha dancing competitors in the state of California. And we learn a little bit about their dancing, and a little bit about their relationship, and a little bit about their journey here from Vietnam and escaping Vietnam. But I felt like we didn't go into enough depth in any of those situations, and so the film felt a little bit pointless to me. I was just quite kind of bored watching it. We got to see a little bit of their dancing, then we got to chat a little bit about their journey, and like, I think if we'd gone into depth about any one of those aspects, it would have been more interesting than the film we ended up with. I can't really understand why this one's been nominated. And then we have St. Louis Superman, it's quite hard to say, which is about a guy from St. Louis who, his brother was shot in front of him when his brother was only 9, and he's attended 137 funerals of people who's been shot, and so he decided to run for the Senate, and he got elected to the Senate. And we see him attempting to get this bill put through, which declares gun violence an epidemic in young people because of it being a leading cause in death of young people in St. Louis, and in particular the area where he is from. I found this film really inspirational. The fact that somebody is experiencing this level of trauma and this level of gun violence and crime in their area so close to home, and decides that they need to do something about it at, you know, the political level, and the determination of going to run for Senate and being elected to Senate and getting, you know, trying to get this bill put through. I really, really enjoyed it. This one wasn't a very long one as well, and I feel like we could have either included more detail in what we had, or made it slightly longer to get a little bit more detail, but it was really interesting and really inspirational. So I think that my favourite of the bunch was definitely the one about the skate school in Afghanistan, but St. Louis Superman comes a very close second. The other three I really didn't like. at all and don't necessarily understand their nomination. It would be interesting if they did it a bit like the animations, where you get to see the highly commended films as well. It'd be interesting to see what made the kind of long list but not the short list, because I'm sure there would be a couple on there that would be deserving in place of some of these that weren't so great on the list. So there you have it. I appreciate that there's not necessarily as much to talk about in these short films because they haven't been released for general release. You know, I went to special showings of all of the animated and all of the live action and all of the documentary films, and if those aren't available where you are, then you won't get a chance to see them, but most of them are available online, and all the list of nominated films you can find online. So yes, so I will be back with more Oscars week videos for you very soon, so make sure that you are subscribed so those land in your subscription feed. I will have my discussion of best pictures and best directors and what have you coming up, so you're not going to want to miss those. As I say, all the other videos, and if you are coming to this after the fact, will be available in my playlist, which I'll have linked up here. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a thumbs up, and I will see you with another Oscars week video tomorrow.